At the end of the day, music, it's more than an art, artificial form of reproduction of life. It's more than a science, while it's extremely intelligently constructed. It's more than a language, because it doesn't say specific things. It says things that matter differently to each person. It's almost like as if it's just the expression of the humankind's dream, projection. And because there are no words to describe the trajectory of life besides finitude, part of life, and without to philosophize either, I have been blessed to live most of my life since I was a child in the musical idiom. So I didn't think about it as a language. Perhaps it was. I remember when I was asked if, as a child, I knew the 7 clefs, I thought I only know the 2. Didn't know there are more. So of course there is always more. To learn, to study, to explore, to realize, to better yourself at the trade-off through an instrument or an organization of instruments or choir or singing or opera or ballet or organizing, conducting groups of musicians to participate to a harmony by the sinfonia of the word symphonos in Greek, that means in agreement. From the polyphonic voices in agreement to the individual neurons organizing with cognitive memory, the virtuosity of velocity of fingers, independence of fingers, thinking, organizing and structuring complexities and simplicities, which at the end of it, in my humble opinion, just trigger incredible emotions that can be hardly described, since that's why there is music. It's a language that tells the untellable. That's what I discover more and more as I age in this forever young music. As my teacher said, it's a good companion travel through life. Well, it's true. It brings you amazing situations. You think you know it, the piece? Well, you don't. It knows you. Then you feel vulnerable. Then you feel nervous. Then you feel, oh, I love it so much, I don't want to fail it. So it becomes a personal interaction between you and the piece, which is an unformed entity. It becomes part of your soul, of your life, of your inner world. It sings, it speaks, it replays in your head constantly. At least it lives with you. It's not just something you do by an industry of learning how to organize it only, at best. That's why you learn the technique. Then you learn the structure. Then you learn how it's made. And then you know how to reproduce it. Then you become skillful, and then you become reliable. But ultimately, that's not the point. The point is this vibration that it brings us to connect. Is it with the cosmos? Is it with the cycles of the seasons, of the cycles of the astronomy? With, I don't know. But there's something. And I was always wondering, if I wasn't a musician by calling, how would have I considered music? Just like I would consider painting or sculpture or cartoons or films or video games, all kinds of intellectual creativity products made by humans, which in a way represent life, either in a playful way or in a narrative way through fiction since the beginning of writing, and before that through telling ear to mouth since immemorial times. And what is fiction but depicting our shortcomings and our own human excesses and hopes and find that music, and it has to be not limited to classical, I assume. I am a little bit biased, obviously. But I understand that the pulse, the rhythm, the text, for those who consider music with lyrics, without which it's still songs, but they're not, they're pieces. Call it what you want. But they need it either to spice their lives, either to get them going with mood, because music has this entertainment quality, this quality that titillates our energies or excitements, or the opposite, the calming and the daydreaming and the abandonment. So yes, we could use it as a lullaby or an exciter. We can use it for helping us to pray if we are needing this spiritual elevation. We can use it for running. We can use it for sports. We can use it for everything. It's sort of it's like air and water and species on earth and sky and colors of trees and plants and unbelievable variety of human life on this planet as we know it or as we perceive it. And it doesn't have to be old or new, modern or extraordinarily avant-garde. In fact, it has to be connecting humans through what it means to them subliminally, psychologically, directly to the soul, to the impulsive, intuitive persona in us, like appetite for food, appetite for life, appetite for pleasure, appetite for self-fulfillment, appetite for understanding, appetite for curiosity, curiosity of how things are done and why are they done. And even if I will never answer myself these questions, if I am not able to, I would like to dig some. What is in the cosmos? What is on earth? What is under the water? Why and what happened and how? And somehow I find that even if I was not a musician by calling, I would have perhaps found in music some kind of solace, perhaps some kind of need to reflect. I wouldn't have to verbalize it. I wouldn't have to explain it, analyze it, dissect it, organize it, chronologize it, explain it, teach it. And besides, is the explanation the root of it, or is it the captivating capacity of getting inspired by it? For whatever we do, we think, we wish, we dream, we perhaps it's also due to the different characters of people. Some people are more reflective, some are more active, some are more reactive, some are more... no, I think it's probably as mysterious as life on earth itself. Well, so marvelous. And even when it's painful and incredibly cruelly unfair, either by human making or by nature disasters, there is something about the intelligent glare of an animal or a child who looks at you, and it's like as if you receive so much information of the emotion through the gaze of somebody who loves you or cares for you or just is. And you just are, and they are, and we just are. And we don't know from why until when and for what. We try to make sense of it by making boundaries and layers of societal wealth and powers and people threatening owning and at levels of countries and continents and there are, of course, a lot of people of goodwill who think in terms of goodness of humanity, who are considered naive. That's probably never been different from beginning of times, but be it as it is, I'm very grateful that, in fact, I live daily with music, for music, by music, with music, for musicians, next to musicians, not very close every time, but you do when it's possible, because the trajectories of students are different from even chamber music partners or musicians, teachers. I mean, just being in close connection with the harmonic melodic combinations or rhythmic combinations of composers' thoughts beyond what they are or how they are made is what they trigger in your inner world of imagination of brotherhood of humans. I know it's cheesy to say, and the great poets and the great authors managed to say the essential with simple words. And I think even they are at a loss of word when the music is the word. But it's not a word, it's the music itself. It tells and connects people between us without to have to explain. Like that gaze or that smile of a child or of a friend or of a parent or of an animal, or I don't know, just this moment where you know that there's something meaningful that touches you. The perspective on life changes with the seasons of life by essence, and the perception of what it was or meant to be or have become, or what you've done in it or how much you didn't do of what you thought you might, because circumstances, situation, choices, free choice is given to us regardless. And still we have guides of morality, of fairness, of desire to bring the best to the next generation, either through parenting if we don't, or if, and of course through teaching. But then the transmission is changing constantly, not because of technology, as people like to say. That's a good tool. Wish some of the predecessors of ours had it, because it's question, what do you do with this tool? Industrial quantity of music creativity, or just a capacity to connect people instantaneously? I think that latter one is very, for me, meaningful. I send those water bottles through the cyber air, and instead of water I've put some music, and they float there like a message, and somebody somewhere catches it. Is it serendipitous? Probably. Is it completely in a hopeless desire to connect with people? Possibly. But it's miraculous when it happens, for as long as it does. But isn't that all? Of course, we are very often limited by our understanding, our comprehension, our language, our humor, or lack of, or sense of, and therefore our tastes for music, old, new, modern, depending how people categorize it. Officially, music is to be and will remain the language that connects people beyond their nationalities, beyond their time zones of life, beyond the meaning that they give to it, because in a way each piece of music seems to mean so many different things to so many different people in the same time period, later and through time. And that is so incredible, because languages evolve. musical language too. Except that when you revisit music with today's instruments, ear, psyche, exchange electronically or in person, it remains as meaningful for the essence of it than the thought of this yearning, hope, expectation, drive, and happiness and jubilation and spiritual uplifting of music written in the 18th, 17th, or 16th centuries in Europe, where the notation, the connection of the layered voices organized this idealized society of equals through contrapoint and SATB singing choir, which was also a way to connect directly the breath with the voice to the group, and to organize harmonic progressions vertically with horizontal meanings layered, and having this impression that we can express in the flow of our, let's say, religious feeling or our amorous feeling, music that expresses poetically and connected, combined with poetry, represents the best of humanity in a way. We extract something from our minds, through our souls, from our experiences, of our characters, of our personalities, and we need to find solace or to find energizing power to go forward into an endeavor. Music is there, military or religious or secular, or to, of course, as we always know, music is there also to entertain, to allow you to dance, to socialize. Music is the soundtrack of life's film. And the reality often is more striking than the fiction in terms of destiny, even if we have our own free will. Nevertheless, we sense that somehow we are drawn towards something that is bigger, brighter, higher, better than us, towards which we yearn. And I find music to be the perfect, in fact, I'm not the one to find, all of us find that music is the perfect travel agent to the afterlife, to the before our time, to combine the past in the present, even with some futuristic aspects in it that we imagine to be so, but doesn't matter. What is so incredible is that music is a soul food, as well as enhancer of our impulses in every aspect. And it can be sometimes difficult to control the drive or the mass hysteria that music can bring, and which is in a way a necessity for the individuals to find themselves in a herd, and to have some kind of idols who represent through their songs or their guitar playing, as simple music as it is in terms of the grammatic complexity of it, vehicling a message of peace, of war, of hope. And all the 20th century, which was incredibly traversed by horrible wars, was always also interlaced with artists, composers, singers, setting trends for the younger generations to hope better after the worst, and to imagine a new way to avoid the worst. It's in a way a rejection as well as a rebuilding. And music can be so many things to so many people, but in sure ways it is also the way to communicate your own marvelment in front of nature, and that all soulful makes all animals, all plants, or all our ecosystem is music in the sense of the poetic aspect of the muse. Of course, a sunset and a sunrise are situations that happen because of the planets and their alignments, but the human nature is such that we inject personal feelings in nature's wonders. So we could think of it in a humanized way, just like we can humanize the animals with whom we dialogue. And in a way, music doesn't need, therefore, lyrics to express what it means, subtly as well. Not just happy, sad, fast, slow, marching for a soldier band, or dancing to relax, or to forget in relaxing things that in another way the music, especially the classical one, brings you to always reflect, to think about yourself, the philosophical finitude, the purpose of it all. And somehow a piece of music, an aria, a fugue, a symphony, an art song, a pop song, an opera, a film with a soundtrack that enhances in ways psychologically what the characters in the written and therefore played, acted storytelling, narration enhances it. And so you live in a life where, of course, through the decades of your life, you change seasons of your life, and some of these music experiences remain specifically, in my youth, I listened to that. Then when I became older, I listened to this. Then because of my children, I started listening to I don't know what. And then I brought them to like what I used to like, but they don't think it's as meaningful to them as it was to me, because in a way it's true. No matter how eternal the music is, and its connection to us as humans through the seasons of life and through the centuries, is that it is a constant necessity. Now that it's recorded, available, and in a way overly available, perhaps is not always considered precious compared to when the only way to have music is to learn how to make it. Just like to eat, you have to learn how to cook it. And when you have cooked foods and therefore recorded music, sorry for the analogy, but it is true that sometimes we take it for granted. Of course, then we can compare interpretations, which is a relatively early 20th century concept between published editions of classical music notation through the centuries, and researching in the past and deciphering and translating and giving us a readable, as of today, capacity of these pieces, while as well as music is constantly the expression of people's cultures, of people's ways of fearing God, fearing death, or being hopeful for an afterlife. All these are hyphenations between us and the unknown, the eternal, the before and the after. And the fact that we don't have to learn how to play the piece in order to reach to it, even if it's a transcription of a Beethoven symphony to play on the piano in four hands or alone. You can hear it directly with the orchestra, but you don't play it. You can experience the hearing of it, but you don't feel the effort and that it takes to produce it. And you might not realize that is difficult. Well, sometimes in music performance, the spectacular isn't as hard as the apparently unspectacular. So it is true that music is a language that you have to practice in order to converse, read in a book, in a philosophy, understand how people think in a culture, because if you cannot, even a good translation, which is already marvelous, doesn't really replace the capacity to read it in the original language, where the thought process corresponds to the sounds of the words you choose. And it's not possible in a lifetime to learn all the languages, to read all the literature, let less to experience it, to understand it. All these are privileges that survival don't really give us a chance for, though more than in centuries past. To more people, not enough. But compared to the elite of the very few of the past. Now it's in comparison more. And in a way, the technical skills of those trained musicians from music schools all over the world in capacity of hearing what their counterparts do on recordings online and in audio and video and all these, and tutorials and classes. It's an effervescence of musical bubble everywhere that is popping in excitement, either because countries that have a tradition of an oral transmission of music, pentatonic in Asia, full tone in France with Debussy, but not only, of course, and augmented second melodically in Arabia or in Turkey, are just this kind of recognizable on the surface symbols of what immediately connects our imagination through few notes of music to a given geographic area of our understanding today of things as they are in terms of geopolitical situations. But isn't that marvelous? And so much more meaningful than wars, destructions, genocides, horrors, hatreds, people spending their life in traumas, either to liberate from oppression, either by the oppression itself. And music should be a healing. And sometimes it is, not always perhaps. It's the solace, it's the capacity to give you, like when you listen to a Bach piece, regardless of your spirituality or not, the fact that the combination of the harmonies and the melodic voices create a mood of almost as if humans are in anxiety and pain and hurt and hope, and not always in the extreme, a music of Bach gives a sense of reassurance, a sense of serene capacity to project yourself and say, things will be good. And I find that the capacity of this can be found in a pop song. You have to know the language, if and so often the word is as meaningful as the music. In a way, the music could be overwhelming the word, or the word could be lost in the middle of very striking music. The balance between the verb and the sound of the combinations of the two, since verb is sound, but also meaning, and music is then becoming the side order of the main thought, as if that is the main theme. And so we can imagine that music, yes, can be a background, can be a foreground, it can be music for every moment of our lifestyles, either to bring us together, either to isolate ourselves with our own thoughts, either help us to go through grief, either help us to understand why and how things are made. Sometimes it unlocks questions you didn't even think of asking, that go deep inside yourself, in a dialogue between yourself and the music. And so it is true that I am blessed to have been in music since I'm born. I didn't choose it, but I certainly cling to it. Because in a way, without to exclude other art forms, other ways of philosophically, scientifically understanding and searching for the meaning of things in social, political aspects, historically through the life of the planet, as much as we know in history, with our curiosity to sort of guess where we're going forward, music seems to be in a timeless zone of its own, that stays there as a marvelous gift that keeps on giving. Up to us to go to it. It's not passively that we'll go to it. We have to go actively to it, regardless if we play it or we just actively listen to it, knowing where it's going, how it's developing, what is the thought material in it. It doesn't take an engineer for that. It just takes curiosity, and it develops the capacity to reflect, to think, to develop, to create inner worlds, imaginary worlds, like you do when you read a book, before even you've seen it set in images by a film or a series. And this way, if you can read the score, you hear it for yourself. You don't need somebody to play it for you. But if you do, then you connect through this performer to the piece rather than another one. And then you become more aware and critical about the choices of this compared to the other. The tempo, the phrasing, the articulation, the meaning, the pacing, the breathing, the tuning, the instrumentarium, everything. Of course, the more you want to know, the more you get to go in depth in this well of mysterious discoveries, which open gates to other mysterious discoveries, and you feel like at some point you have more or less mapped the history of music for the last few centuries in Western Europe, where you have written notation to connect to for that of which is left despite all wars, fires, and all other calamities. And it's still miraculous that we have access to the musical thoughts of these composers of centuries past, which in a way are so present when we play them, as if during the performance of music, it's timeless. Time is suspended, rather. That's what I think is marvelous, to travel through suspended time in one's own imaginary projections, which the music brings us. And it's a language accessible to all at the basic level, less to those until you get to rise until a certain level of knowledge, which allows you to appreciate more complexities. But that could be said the same about texts, between sacred or secular texts, or novels, or biographies of characters. It's at different levels that we connect. The humor is not the same. The secondary thoughts are not the same. The innuendos are not understood the same way. And there are innuendos in music that the performers can bring, or shortly not even have seen, or if they've seen, overestimate them and bring you to discover the piece through another lens, another point of view, and not always the objective point of view. Is there one? Of course, each publisher will give you that good illusion, because after all, they do research musicologically with their scholars to find manuscripts and first editions and evolution of the details of the desire of the composers, this, the performers, that, the evolution of the piece through their interpretation on different instruments, the phrasing, the bowing, the tempo, the pulse. In fact, the piece is recreated. It takes life in a perpetual rebirth. It sort of vanishes after the performance, especially if it's live, which you cannot right away replay. But in that ephemeral moment of eternity, captured by the love for it, inspired by it, inspiring through it, you communicate, you enrich people's lives, and they'll use some of the elements of this piece in their own scientific or sportive or any research. It doesn't have to be art per se. I think art is in all, but music is in everything we want to be. In fact, we hear the songs of the birds. We know they're communicating, but we don't always know the communications unless we're ornithologists, and even so. But if not, we just love it for what it is: music, poetry, sounds, tolerance, curiosity, naivete in good willingness, compared to most of humanity's self-destructive urge for all kinds of things that are going on since ever, in fact, through greed, possession, power, primary enhancements of the psyches of people without really high sense of true humanity, because it goes through destruction of fellow humans as if they are not even living creatures, but tools in the hands of strategists and ideologists and people who impose groups their opinions through threat, fear, and philosophy, after life, before life, all these things. Music, at least, is less, well, it can be, and sometimes is, ideologically manipulative and manipulating, but not really. I would say that you can individually receive music, reject it, not understand it, be curious, try to go back to it later. Perhaps it's not at the time of your own development of wisdom and language that necessarily means something to you. And you might say, okay, I'll go back to it again. Perhaps opera is not for me, or religious music is not for me, or I prefer dance music, or somebody prefers music as a thought process. Fugues, contrapoint, complexities of musical language, organization of the order of the tones, and reorganization of the alphabet of music. And others is just by the combination of the sounds that create moods, atmospheres, all things that make you be the vibrating membrane of nature. Wouldn't that be marvelous if music could bring peace? I know it's very naive, but it seems to have always been through history at the same time, between the oral traditions or the written traditions. It has been part of people's lives in horrible situations of wars as well as in peacetime. So perhaps it is its continuum that, or the need for it, and the capacity to connect to it, that is way beyond just a language. It's somehow the expression of our human experience accumulated through the times and consumed outside of their time period, which is really striking. How come it can mean so much in the 21st century, something written in the 17th? Isn't that wonderful? Somewhere we learn something about ourselves when we discover the intricacies, the subtleties, the complexities, or the simple beauties of a melodic line of the past, of some human who has come in, heard it somewhere inside themselves, and then give it to us. Either oral transmission, as I said, either written transmission, regardless of its loss on the way or a transformation on the way, until it reaches us before we project it further. And I think it's very humbling to know that regardless of how we consider in classical music that certain pieces are supposed to be played stylistically for their genre and the way of approaching it with a knowledgeable and cultivated and tradition, connecting you to something that you consider the well of truth of the piece. For others, it's just whatever it is. They don't have to know, they don't have to guess, they don't have to understand. Not everybody can be a specialist in every aspect of things, obviously. And I think beyond all that, music brings us together. Even if individually, that's the beautiful paradox of it. We yearn for sharing the beauties of music.